Susie's dreams become a nightmare when the Legion takes their final step towards becoming a part of the entity and the video game known as Dead by Daylight. We're going to talk about it right here in our review of Dead by Daylight number 4 from Titan Comics. See you in 3. And welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Dead by Daylight number 4 from Titan Comics. And the prequel series comes to a close when Susie's dreams and nightmares become a reality. Before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notification, let us know how we're doing. Your attention is greatly appreciated. Don't forget to stay tuned through the end for the score. So let's talk about the credits. Dead by Daylight number 4, Titan Comics, written by Nadia Shamas, art by Dylan Snook, colors by Emilio Leckie or Lessie, not quite sure. Letters by Annual Designs Jamie, and the cover art is drawn by Danny and Brad Simpson. Let's talk about what happened in the previous issue, because it's been a while. If you've been interested in the series and wondered where it went, this particular prequel series, which is a precursor to the events of the video game, if you are a fan of Dead by Daylight, has been on a 5-month plus hiatus. So we haven't seen it since September. Why it was on the hiatus? I don't know. Printing issue? Maybe. Content rewrite? Who knows? But it's been on a hiatus since September, and that's where we are. So it's been a while. You might have forgotten what happened. In the previous issue, which is issue number 3, the newly formed group that calls themselves Legion, which is Susie, Julie, Joey, and Frank, they created their masks. They decided that they were going to go into a convenience/grocery store and mess it up. In other words, their acts of vandalism and destruction are starting to escalate. Unfortunately, when they go into the store after its closing time and they decided to start messing around, they are surprised by one of the clerks who works in the store, and he's got somebody in a headlock. I believe he has Julie in a headlock. They're all wearing masks, so sometimes it's a little tough to tell. And that's where we left off. It was like, wow, cliffhanger. That's a pretty big deal. Where do we start off here? We start off with an 8-page dream. Fine. An 8-page dream. And in this dream, Susie imagines herself beating up her abusive father with a hockey stick. It gets pretty violent, and it gets very cathartic because he has a history of abuse against Susie. After the deed is done, she's accosted by somebody who looks like her but wearing the Dead by Daylight mask, the blank face with the X eyes, and chases her through the house. But it's her, but it's not her. It's sort of the future version of her. She runs out through the garage and she's met by Julie. And Julie suddenly kisses her, and it awakens all kinds of romantic feelings that Susie is secretly harboring for Julie. And then at the end of the kiss, Julie stabs Susie in the gut, and now all of a sudden that realization of that unrequited love, that those feelings that have been sort of on the back burner, now all of a sudden suddenly switch to shock and horror because she's been stabbed by the woman that she secretly loves. And then she wakes up, and she's in the middle of a classroom screaming, which happens to be at the same time that a bell goes off, which means that the class has ended and it's time to move on. Okay, that's fine. 8 pages is a long time, but okay, especially when this is the last issue. After the class bell is rung, she goes out and decides that she's going to get a smoke in the back near the dumpsters, where she encounters another classmate who's sort of cool with her, and they're sort of okay together. And Susie shares some of the drawings that she's been doing, because this friend, a boy, has seen her at the comic shop and he knows that she has some artistic talent, but he doesn't get why she hangs out with Julie. And she's questioned on it because he says Julie's mean and she's vicious and she can be really a toxic person to be around. And Susie, without getting too far into the secret romantic feelings she has for her, lets it slip, or lets it out, that she admires Julie because Julie basically doesn't care about what anybody thinks, and she's willing to be mean. She's willing to let her feelings out regardless of the consequences, and she respects and somewhat admires that, really projecting her own repressed feelings onto Julie and living vicariously through her. And then that scene ends. So now we have a flashback. that ends, and then we move into back to where we are now with the cliffhanger. And what happens? Frank sneaks up behind the store clerk that has Julie in a headlock, and he stabs him in the back of the neck. And he falls down. He's dying. He's in pain. He's racked with all kinds of damage to his spinal cord, and he's sobbing. And what happens? Julie takes the knife from Frank's hands, and then she stabs him. And then in turn, they're all forced to take a turn stabbing this guy, even though he may already be dead. But they all have to do it anyway as an act of, think of it as a blood ritual, or an opportunity for them to bond in a way that is unforgivable or inescapable. And then what happens is they go later, they take the clerk, they bury him, but as they are burying the body, mists start to form around them. And in the mists, they start to see shadowy figures come up and pop up and draw closer. But they're scary, but at the same time, they're inviting as well. And then what happens at the very end, Susie is now invited into the fold. The entity has extended the invitation to come into its realm, and then begins the Dead by Daylight video game. And that's it. That's the end of the miniseries. You waited 5 months, 5+ months for the last issue, and the last issue is a dream, a flashback. They kill the clerk, and then end of the prequel that now leads into the video game, which most people would be familiar with. And that's it. Okay, so if that seems a little weird, it felt weird reading it. It looked weird watching it play out, but that's sometimes weird is okay. Let's talk about the pluses and the minuses. What do we like about Dead by Daylight number 4? Susie's emotional journey is hectic, tragic, chaotic, and impactful. So if you're just in it to kind of follow along with Susie to understand where she's headed and whether or not she'll actually take that last step, even though in the heart of it, at the very base of her personality, she is a good person. She's just put in a really bad situation and surrounded by really bad people. And therefore, it makes sense that she's sort of drawn into this world of becoming a killer, even though she doesn't really want to. And the conflict and the nature of the emotional struggle she goes through is interesting and heartbreaking in a sense. It's very tragic in the way it plays out. What didn't we like about it? It just sort of felt like a long wait and a lot of build up to get to one very simple conclusion, which is if you kill a guy, the entity will take you into the realm in which it lives, which is the start of the video game. I don't know that we needed an 8-page dream sequence to figure out that Susie has an abusive father and she has secret romantic feelings for Julie. That seems like a long time, and that could have been spelled out a little bit better, because the beginning of the series, actually mostly up to this point, has been spent almost entirely on the relationship between Frank and Julie. So if Susie was important to this narrative, why wasn't this spelled out sooner rather than waiting to the very end, which should be the climax? And then you have this flashback sequence that sort of doesn't really add anything to the story, and it only reinforces why Susie has feelings for Julie, some of which are romantic and some of which are just admiration. I mean, that's nice character building for Susie, but honestly irrelevant to where the story is headed, or should have been more evenly distributed out through the first 2 or 3 issues, and it wasn't. So it feels like a lot of stuff was just dumped on the end just to get to the end, because the ending, if you look at the story as far as the Legion coming together and what they finally do to be invited into the game by the entity, is let's kill him in, and then by virtue of everyone taking their turn participating in that murder, then now you've graduated to what the game holds for them, which is it's not that killing somebody isn't a big deal. It is a big deal, and it should be treated as a big deal. But it felt like there was a lot of fluff around it just to get to this one act, and there could have been more energy spent on building up to that act rather than making it something that happens so quick and then they're done with it. Sort of depends on what you're looking for in the story, but to me it feels like they didn't do enough character work in the beginning for somebody who was supposed to be a key character, and then they just shoved it all in the end, which at the same time took away from the big climax, which should have been the murder of the clerk. But that's the way it goes sometimes. How about the art? Let's talk about the art. So Dylan Snook's art is okay. It's a very you want to be careful when you say this. It's a very indie style in the sense that it's loose, it's not very detailed, it's not very clean. The lines are definitely not clean. The lines are not very detailed or precise or crisp. This is very sketchy type of art, and for the nature of the story, because it is so much from the perspective of teenagers who are struggling to make sense of who they are and where they fit in the world, makes sense. But it's maybe not everybody's cup of tea. And so if you're looking for cleaner art or more visually dramatic art, you're probably not going to get that here. This feels very, I won't say amateurish, but it's a very indie style type of presentation, visually speaking. So, final thoughts. What do we think about Dead by Daylight #4 from Titan Comics? Emotionally impactful, and you finish exactly where you expected to go, which is the Legion committing an unforgivable act to be invited into the beginning of what would be known as the video game going forward. However, on the downside of it, there's a lot of fluff to build up the character of Susie, which didn't really change the outcome of the story in any way. And a lot of that character development should have happened much sooner, so that way more time could have been spent on the murder and what happens after. So therefore, we're going to give Dead by Daylight #4 from Titan Comics a 6.8 out of 10. I hope you enjoyed this review. Please stay tuned to more through the outro, and we will see you soon.